Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome back to the Monster Manual Backward, where today we're going to continue along with the Commoner and the Noble. So, the Commoner is, again, medium humanoid, any race, any alignment, armor class of 10, hit points of 1d8, 30 speed, no bonuses or negatives to any of their stats, passive perception of 10, any one language, usually common, challenge rating 0. Their action is they can hit with a club, +2 to hit, 1d4 damage. Commoners include peasants, serfs, slaves, servants, pilgrims, merchants, artisans, and hermits. Yeah, there's not a whole ton to talk about with this. Commoners, you're going to use almost exclusively as either background characters or characters who are in over their head who need saving. Maybe if you needed an angry mob, the Commoner wouldn't be a terrible choice. You can modify their race to give them probably 1+1 stat. Yeah, it's... If you want to modify them and make them harder, I would suggest pick a different stat block, honestly. This is just... Oh, darn it, there's some random person who has absolutely no anything. They're just like a farmer in the field, and for some reason, I need a stat block for them. They're not really good at anything, so Commoner, I guess. Something I would do, especially if they're like pilgrims or hermits, instead of a club, give them a quarterstaff. Merchants, I might actually give like a real legitimate weapon. Like a short sword or something. Again, not something very deadly, but... You know, merchants, especially in like a merchant caravan, they're going to be expecting some sort of trouble. They're not going to be fully unarmed or unarmored. Other than that, instead of a club, maybe a sickle. Which, thinking about it, I don't know if a sickle is a weapon in 5th edition. I play many different games. The sickles are weapons in some. Okay, sickles are. And the only difference between a club and a sickle is clubs do bludgeoning, sickles do slashing. Or maybe a dagger. Same thing, except it's piercing. In fact, I'd actually probably give them a dagger more often than a club. Especially if we're in like a town or city or something. I would imagine most common people in like a city carry a small dagger on them rather than a small club. And farmers, club or sickle. But yeah, like, it wouldn't really do much to make this harder. I would go pick a different... You know, if this had to be a combat that I didn't want to be super easy, I would pick a different class. Or a different stat block. Really, any different stat block. Commoners are just... They're extras. Again, not too much to talk about with our first entry, but let's flip over to the noble real quick. So over to the noble. Medium humanoid, any race, any alignment. Armor class 15, because they have a breastplate. Hit points are 2d8, so twice what our commoner is. Let's see, they've got a plus to dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, with charisma being the highest. They have 3 skills: deception, insight, and persuasion. A decent passive perception. They know 2 languages. A challenge rating of 1/8. They have a rapier attack. And they have a reaction of parry, where they'll add 2 to their AC against a single melee attack. Nobles wield great authority and influence as members of the upper class, possessing wealth and connections that can make them as powerful as monarchs and generals. A noble often travels in the company of guards, as well as servants who are commoners. The noble's statistics can also be used to represent courtiers who are not of noble birth. So, a little bit more powerful than your commoner. Now, how I would use the noble, it's mostly as a social encounter. If you have a good party, they're probably not going to be fighting nobles. And again, if they are fighting nobles, as it says in the little blurb, they generally have guards and servants. And the servants use the commoner stat block, and guards use the guard stat block, which will be in an upcoming episode. So be sure to look out for that. Now, when you pick a race for this noble, that would definitely change their weapon. In fact, I definitely would. My worlds tend to bend closer to medieval than Renaissance. And I do know that this is a wonderful Renaissance picture of a noble man. But the rapier to me screams Italian noble Renaissance. And to a lesser degree, so does the breastplate. But what I would do is just, like, if it's a dwarf, give him an axe or a warhammer. I know those are stereotypical, and I know a couple episodes ago I kind of railed against doing that. But I imagine nobles being more stereotypical than, like, commoners. I imagine nobles creating racial stereotypes. So, like, humans, if you're not going, like, a Mediterranean bend, so, like, Italian, Spanish, southern France, actually, that'd be about it. I know there's a lot more of the Mediterranean, but rapiers, to me, feel very Italian, a little bit Spanish, maybe southern France, maybe along the Dalmatian coast, which is the coast of the Balkans on the other side of the Adriatic Sea from Italy, for those who might not know. I see most nobles actually having, like, long swords, especially if they're elves or humans who are not Mediterranean, again. Dwarves, axes, warhammers, change up their armor, maybe give them a shield. It depends on how warlike they're being. Like, I imagine wearing a breastplate and, like, a sword or something might not raise suspicions going through a town or city, especially if they're clearly nobility. But maybe walking around in plate mail with a shield and one or more swords, that probably would. So, don't do that. Yeah, again, I don't really see the stat block being used in combat a lot. I see him being used in social encounters, either as someone giving a quest or an antagonist, but not like a direct need to beat this person down antagonist. So I would lean more heavily on their deception, their insight, their persuasion, which they have decent stats in. And even if they change their weapon, I would still keep their reaction ability of parry. Because that's useful, and it's only a +2. Yeah. So that is actually about it. I know this is a shorter episode than past Monster Manual Backwards, but we had 2 rather short stat blocks about characters that are mostly either background characters or characters that you would use in social situations. And yeah, with the noble, if he's in a social situation, he's not... You probably shouldn't be coming up with his stats on the fly. You should have workshopped him beforehand, unless things have gone really off the rails. In that case, if you're making a noble up whole cloth, give him a race, give him a name, maybe change his weapon, and just roll with it. But make sure you tune in next time, where we are going to cover the cultist and the cult fanatic. Thank you.